Hello, everyone, and welcome. For those of you that are new, I am Tracy Anderson, Rise Association Marketing Coordinator, and we are delighted you have joined us for today's webinar. This webinar is titled Drive Forward Thinking in 2023 with Predictive Analytics for Value-Based Results, presented by EX Health. Today, we are joined by Andy Kumar and Varun Pandarathil. Thank you all for being here, and without further ado, I will let them take it from here.
Awesome. And Varun, I think you can be sharing the deck. So thank you all, and thanks Tracy for the introduction and giving us an opportunity to present and share some of our insight around how predictive analytics can be an incredible tool to drive results in your value-based program. And thank you all for attending this session. I'm super excited. We're hosting this session beginning of the year because it's important to really plan out your year, and using predictive analytics tool can really assist you in your 2023 goals. I'm Andy Kumar, as Tracy kind of mentioned. I lead the risk adjustment business at EXL, and I'm joined with Varun, who heads up the product and operation at EXL Health. In terms of agenda, we'll begin with explaining before we get started, a little bit about EXL Health. EXL Health is a market leader in healthcare analytics for both payers and providers. We serve multiple different use cases in the healthcare market. When you think about risk adjustment specifically, we have 14 plus years of experience in this market, serving 30 plus customers, both payers and provider, managing about 800K lives, delivering almost about 8x ROI. We've been ranked best in class for 22, and we hope to get similar ranking in 23. We have deep experience in analytics and AI. We also offer a range of services from coding, education, member engagement, and staff augmentation. So yeah, we are happy to be here and talk about predictive analytics and how it can really drive your growth in 2023. But before we get into the content, I'd like to conduct a quick poll. So if Tracy, you want to pull that up? So the poll question is, what type of analytics is your organization leveraging from a risk adjustment program? So if you don't mind selecting the choice. But yeah, that's pretty much in line with what I expected. Majority of the organization, if you look into the market trend, is moving away from descriptive analytics and moving to predictive analytics. Predictive and prescriptive analytics, and then there has been a growing trend of moving healthcare to big data and diagnostic analytics, and this is in line with what I expected. So just to kind of orient everybody in terms of what are the different types of analytics that is available in the market. So there's several types of analytics when you go in the market, as you kind of wrote it in there, that vendors are selling in the market. And the best way to kind of describe and differentiate between these analytics is by using this simple table that kind of shows, what is this specific analytics helpful for? So when you think about descriptive and diagnostic analytics, we're essentially looking at data that's historical and that's in past. So the information that is being presented to you is essentially summary of what has already been happened. And then predictive and prescriptive is more future in nature. And then big data covers the entire trend of past, present, and future. So just in a nutshell, if you think about descriptive analytics, it tells you what happened in the past. When you think about diagnostic analytics, it helps you understand why something happened in the past. If you think about predictive analytics, it essentially predicts what is most likely to happen in future. Prescriptive analytics recommends action that you can take to affect those outcomes. And then essentially big data, AI, which is the most comprehensive part of the analytics. Healthcare is kind of moving towards there. But it's not fully there yet. But it essentially covers the full gamut of past, present, and future. So for the purposes of this discussion, we'll essentially focus on predictive analytics today. So at a high level, predictive analytics is a type of analytics that involves using data and statistics. As I was kind of saying, at a high level, predictive analytic is essentially a type of analytics that involve using data and statistical model for forecasting purposes. The term that I really want to highlight here is the statistical model. As when you look for tools in the market, that's the key component that is essential for your forecasting, because these statistical models and algorithms are essentially built by training on multiple sets of data. Essentially they read the pattern in the data and use the knowledge to make that prediction, which is the key component of any predictive analytics. So the rule of thumb here is more data you train on equals better algorithm, which in turn means better accuracy. So the goal of the predictive analytic is to make the best possible prediction and a highly accurate prediction. And few of the examples that is kind of listed in here is, what is the likelihood for patient being diabetic? What will be the cost of care to treat cancer? So those are the types of questions that predictive analytics is essentially answering. So if you go to the next slide, in terms of the role that predictive analytics plays, it is an extremely powerful tool, because it is critical component for any organization, because it enables you to make informed decision based on data, right? The more data that you have, the better prediction you can make, and you have better information available. So by understanding what is a likelihood for an event to happen in the future, the organization essentially can be really proactive in terms of creating mitigation strategies, managing their risk, optimizing the resources, and ultimately to improve the outcome. So that's the reason why organizations invest in predictive analytics tools. In healthcare, so when you think about healthcare and the role that predictive analytics has played in the healthcare, it is one of the most crucial role that predictive analytics has played in the healthcare, especially for the operators who are responsible for either value-based program or risk adjustment program. So specifically in risk adjustment, organization can use the analytics to not only identify, but also predict the health risks associated to their member population. And they can use some of the leading indicators that is available in the medical chart that enables them to make those predictions. So it's not only important for providers to provide a better care based on this information, but also for health plans to manage their future costs. From a population health management, understanding who will get sick and what measures you can put in place to avoid this is also incredible. If you are an operator, understanding how it impacts your future cost and can really help you kind of bid appropriately for the Medicare Advantage plan in your location. It also enables operators to essentially, as I kind of mentioned, with this kind of data, if you understand what's your cost in future, you can really streamline your resources and have appropriate resource allocation, put some measures in place to be more efficient based on the trends and the patterns of the data. So overall, in my opinion, predictive analytics has a huge ROI in healthcare market, which Varun later in the presentation will cover with some specific example of how EXL has used this with our customer and is really successful. Let's kind of talk about what is the current state, and the poll was really incredible to help us guide there. What we saw that
majority of the folks, at least on the call and what I see in the market, is moving away from descriptive analytics, and they are moving towards predictive and prescriptive analytics. Big data and AI, people are testing this out, but it's still in the phase where you don't have all the data, or the data is still the model is still being developed. So that's definitely futuristic, but I definitely see there's a big transition from descriptive to predictive analytics. So when you think about what's descriptive analytics, what healthcare organization has been doing in the past is traditionally, in the risk adjustment market, they relied on the descriptive analytic to really understand what is the risk for their population, right? Who are the sickest members? Who are the members who are doing well? And that essentially involves, presenting historical data based on claim information that you already have. You can tell that, hey, these are the set of the members based on historical data are the sickest, or they are the healthiest. So you understand, what is the condition that is available on the member and the patient population. With predictive analytics, now what healthcare organizations, especially in risk adjustment, are doing is really understanding, I know who are my sickest member, but now I want to know in future, who are the members who will get sick, or we know these are the leading indicators. That means we have to optimize our resources or plan for the future so that we are successful in this Medicare Advantage plan. So predictive analytics plays a key role there, and it really leverages the different data sources that is available, the technology that is available, to understand or get a more comprehensive and accurate understanding of your patient health risk, not just today, but in future, which is important to be successful in this business. So, why is this transition happening? So the reason why this transition is happening is one of the major changes that everybody in healthcare is pushing for is data liquidity, right? So with more data that is coming into play, majority of the health systems are already on electronic health record. And, with the progress that CMS is kind of making in terms of opening up the data, the technology advancement in FHIR, the more, as I kind of mentioned earlier, for predictive analytics, the more data that is available, the more models you can build, and better the models, the better predictions that is available. So that's essentially driving this transition from descriptive to predictive analytics, which is the right way and the future of the analytics in the healthcare market. I'll pause here to do another quick poll, and then I'll share the results. Are you considering implementing prospective predictive analytics tools? So we'll give 30 seconds for people to respond. All right, so the results are in. We see 65% of the people said yes, 6% said no, and 29% says maybe, which is in line, right? So as I kind of mentioned, majority of the organization are in this transition from descriptive to predictive analytics, and everybody is either already on it or they are planning to get on implementing a predictive analytics tool. So before I pass the ball to Varun, I just want to talk about the future of analytics and what I see from my vantage point, what's going on in the market. So some of the key trends that I predict, and then before I go towards the trend, as I kind of mentioned, the reason why there has been great advancement in analytics is driven by the healthcare data liquidity, right? And the advancement in technologies, essentially driving that push towards predictive and the big data analytics. What I see and what I can predict is there'll be an increase in the use of AI and machine learning to essentially constantly learn from the data, create new models that will give us better prediction. With the data liquidity, you have more data, and more data, as I kind of mentioned, will lead to more models and lead to an accurate model. The other trend that I'm seeing is the compute cost with advancement in technology is going down. So lower the compute cost will enable you to train a larger data set that will also improve the accuracy of these data model. I also see a lot of advancement in data visualization tool, and these visualization tools are also being really flexible. So it's not like, hey, here's the report, here's the dashboard that I created, and that's all you have. It's more of a drag and drop kind of feature functionality that is available to the consumer, so they can create their own reports. I talked about the third point is with the data liquidity, there's going to be more and more data that will be available from multiple sources that will enable this future. And then lastly, as we all work in healthcare, data security and privacy is extremely important. One of the reasons why the data was not liquid is because of these privacy and data security concerns. But with advancement in technology and consumer having more control of how they can control the data and where their data goes, I think that will also enable this change. So overall, we're just, in my opinion, scratching the surface in the healthcare analytics. I predict that we'll soon, next year or in a couple of years when I'm talking, we're talking about big data and AI rather than predictive analytics, because we have leapfrog there. For those of you who are familiar with my vision, those of you familiar with ChatGPT, I personally would like to see a healthcare version of ChatGPT in the future. So that's my prediction. With that, I'll pass the ball to Varun to talk more about some of the specific use cases where predictive analytics has been successful. So Varun, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. So, predictive analytics, and what does it mean in the world of, say, risk adjustment? What would be some common use cases that can be pursued leveraging predictive analytics? Starting up with the most common one is, how do you prioritize members for, say, retrospective or prospective chart reviews? Can you leverage predictive analytics to identify not only members, but also clinicians, primary care practices, where there might be the maximum opportunity to recapture some risk? That would be the chart review prioritization use case. And going on to the second one, which is a natural progression of the first, would be who are the clinicians or providers that either as a health system or as an MA plan or an MSO, you want to be targeting to improve gap closure, and preferably at the point of care if there are digital solutions in place. Which clinicians need more training, more attention in terms of more comprehensive risk recapture, more comprehensive documentation, and there can be predictive models built based on training of historical data to identify this and predict with a certain confidence as to what would be the lift in terms of both gap and true RAF that can be closed. The third one, again, just making natural progressions here. You've identified the charts to chase retrospectively. You've identified which clinicians or providers you want to target for better education on documentation. The third piece would be which patients or members you want to outreach to proactively manage mental health. Here, there is obviously an element of SDOH that comes in. Make your data sets more richer, not just risk adjustment, not just historical claims, but how do we bring in some EMR data? How do we bring in other aspects like SDOH data to make patient outreach more effective? And how do you prioritize those patients as well, especially at the beginning of the year, to make sure that who are the patients who need to be prioritized to come in for an annual wellness visit? And again, natural progression would be to gap closure strategies, what would be your high value, high confidence risk gaps that need to be closed. Now, this kind of ties back into provider education and gap closure of point of care. What are the gaps that predictive analytics can provide to you with a high degree of certainty or confidence, with a confidence factor, saying this is still a valid condition for this patient and this condition needs to be managed, and the provider needs to take a call based on the current year's assessment. And finally, would be patient vulnerability and risk stratification, and that is going one step ahead, where you're looking at not just siloed information or not combining pure data sets, but also looking at building more correlations. And this is a use case that I'm going to speak to you all about in the next few slides, where during when the pandemic hit, how we leveraged predictive analytics to build out a patient vulnerability model, not just based on risk adjustment, but also based on whatever clinical guidance was available to us at that point from our clients, from our health system clients, to stratify patients and build out almost a patient vulnerability model and risk stratification. This use case, we started working on this in the middle of 2020 when the pandemic was new, it was raging, and one of our clients, a large health system, wanted to identify who were the most vulnerable patients and prioritize outreach because, as you're aware, the scheduled visits, the office visits were tailing off completely. Doctors were finding it very difficult to get in touch with their patients, and also outreach and provide them that care and comfort, especially in the Medicare aged population. That outreach of that PCP or a familiar face, this health system felt that would go a long way in ensuring that the patients are comfortable and are taken care of. At the same time, with regulation setting in, they participated in multiple value-based contracts. So they also wanted to make sure that they were doing the best that they could in terms of ensuring that they're recapturing as much risk as possible. Some of the other challenges that they had was they wanted to leverage not just pockets of physicians, but they wanted to leverage their entire physician base and maximize the patient outreach, ensure that they got in touch with and got in front of either through telehealth or through in-person office visits to maximum patients so that they could provide appropriate care. So the key driver here was, of course, they didn't know how to risk stratify or prioritize that patients. How do you come up with a list that says, okay, these are my highest risk, most vulnerable population, and how do I prioritize outreach and how do I make it effective prioritization of outreach for those patients? This is where a lot of the predictive analytics and the modeling came into picture. We had historical data in terms of claims, in terms of previous risk adjustment performance, on how often a patient was seeking healthcare services from this group. And to that, what we did was we added other factors, right? We added what are the other suspected conditions by scrubbing through EMRs. We looked at member history and added rules and algorithms around vulnerability to COVID, susceptibility to COVID based on certain specific conditions or history of certain conditions. We added, of course, regular factors like age, the current comorbid conditions, and also how frequently or what was the last time that they accessed primary care services from the health system. This was some of the key broad elements that we added. In addition to this, wherever was possible, we were able to integrate with the EMRs and get other additional information like some lab values, test results, risk of diabetes, BMI information, a whole host of those clinical parameters was also brought in. And what we started to do was build a model that looked at one, risk stratifying patients based on these key conditions, and then also layering on top of that what would be potential conditions that they could suffer from, possibly not diagnosed, possibly not documented, and how will that impact their susceptibility to, say, COVID, or how would that impact them having certain procedures or certain types of care being delayed or moved down the road. Now, we built this prioritized patient list based on engagement of a predictive model. And then the last piece that we did was overlay this with SDOH information. SDOH information very specifically around what was the zip codes, the habits, the access to certain types of food, certain types of environmental factors that was available to us, and then also overlaid this with the preferred means of communication. How would a patient prefer being outreached to? What would make the most sense? And how can we get this patient either scheduled with a telehealth visit or with a with a telehealth visit or with an in-person office visit, and what needs to be done to make that possible, right? The last step was going that full mile and making sure that the clinician or the provider who was doing the outreach, who was finally going to meet with the patient or consult with the patient on telehealth, had a key list of information available to him or her that outlined that these were the conditions that we suspected that the patient was suffering from or had attributed to them, and these were the conditions that need to be reviewed, and anything more that needs to be diagnosed. In a telehealth setting, for example, there are limitations to conditions that could have been diagnosed back in 2020 based on CMS guidelines. So we made this data packet available to the physician at an individual member level as well, which was very useful from our experience. And then the final step, I know I said the previous one, the final step, the actual final step was after the encounter was complete, from a risk adjustment closure, ensuring that there was appropriate documentation risk capture. There was almost concurrent reviews done to ensure that the clinician had checked off all the conditions and had provided appropriate feedback in terms of if there were some conditions that were resolved or were not a valid active condition anymore, so that we could take this back and then further fine-tune our predictive model to make targeting more specific. This was an exercise that took anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks, where we built this from grounds up. Started with the conceptualization. It was very important that we understood what our clients wanted to drive as an outcome, and then we had access to the right data sets, or make the best use of data sets that was available to us at that point, and then make a model that is that would scale across the population, and not something that was very narrow. This solution or this predictive modeling was implemented in around the mid 2020, year 2020, and it yielded very real world results, right? In early 2021, our clients started correlating the vulnerability score that we provided for patients with mortality. And what they realized was the mortality rate of patients coincided very, very closely with the vulnerability scores that we were able to generate, build for them. If you can see, the high risk had the maximum mortality. The medium risk, we'd stratified into 3 broad risk categories. There were other sub-stratifications that we made based on conditions, but broadly these were 3 risk categories that we had. and the 7% was focused on that high risk category. This was real world results. This was evidence that predictive modeling works, and if used effectively, can actually yield results in improving patients' health. So the 5,000 patients who were targeted first, that's where that 7% of diseased were concentrated. And the other aspect was by layering this with data like SDOH, data like what would be an impactability or intervenability for a patient and a condition. They were able to schedule more than 80% of the vulnerable patients that we had prioritized to have either telehealth consults or inpatient visits. And this was, according to our clients, this was much higher than their 2019, 2018 AWVs or their PCP visit rates as well. So this was a very interesting use case where we could use predictive analytics to identify or identify the most vulnerable population, and then use other sets of data to say that yes, these would be the patients who would respond the most to intervention, and then prioritize them and make it actionable or operational for our clients. So in terms of key takeaways, what predictive analytics, what is, how do you make it most effective? Defining the outcome or the key outcomes is very critical to the process. From a business standpoint, knowing what is the objective that you are working towards, having that clear statement or that clear vision that you want to influence helps make predictive analytics more robust in our experience. The output of predictive analytics, everything need not be built into one single model in our experience. I mean, you could have independent models, independent outputs, and then use them as overlays to make the data actionable. Out of any modeling, any statistical or any sort of predictive modeling, actionable data is the most valuable part of any output, right? It doesn't just identifying in this example, just identifying vulnerable patients would have been great. It would have been useful, but the true value was unlocked when we added additional data, additional insight in saying, okay, these are the patients who would respond to a certain sort of intervention. And that's when it became truly actionable and they could operationalize this data very quickly. And finally, any sort of modeling and any sort of predictive model, it has to be built with a scalable and repeatable framework in mind. When we started off this specific exercise, we narrowed the scope to somewhere between 50 to 70,000 patients. And we wanted to focus on creating a vulnerability model for them because of their value-based contracts and also because of their Medicare status. Now, because of how effective the model became in predicting mortality and also patient vulnerability to certain conditions, we've now further tweaked this model to make it a broad-based vulnerability model that is now applied over if I'm not wrong, over 200,000 patients that these clients of ours use it on a day in, day out basis to make decisions on, who are the most vulnerable patients who need to be scheduled at the beginning of the year, how do you manage care, and what would be the almost like rising risk or potential high risk members for the future. So the basis of the model was vulnerability, but because it was scalable, we were able to transform it into something a lot more than just a pure vulnerability. I hope it was a useful example, and the real world application is something that that we strive through all of our analytics, not just providing an output, but also how do you operationalize it.
Thanks, Varun. I think at this point, we've covered all the content, and we'll open up the floor for questions.
All right. So what is your current customer base that is using predictive analytics?
So if you look at our customer base, and we are going through a similar transition of descriptive to predictive analytics, we definitely are converting all our customers to predictive analytics. I would say 50 to 60% of our customers have moved towards predictive analytics, and we are actively working on the rest of the customers to get them on this models.
Okay. How actionable are predictive analytics?
I can take that. Actionable predictive analytics, again, depends on two broad things. One is having a clear vision on what is the impact, the final impact that you want to drive. And the second one being, how do you operationalize the data? Mostly predictive analytics will give you a probability of an event happening, or a probability of a member being a patient or a member being sick or sicker, the probability of a member being a high value member for a gap recapture, for example, or risk recapture. Now, how do you operationalize it? That is when you need to work very closely with the client's operations. In our case, we work with the client's operations team to say, okay, should we for say risk recapture, what type of strategy do you want to implement? Do you want to implement a chart chase? Do you want to implement a chart review program? Or if it's for a vulnerability in this example, how do you want to get in front of the how do you want to get the patient in front of the doctor at the earliest, and what would be the other pieces of information that would help make this decision faster.
Okay. Have you used individuals from a clinical background to guide the criteria for predictive analytics?
So the answer is yes. So when you think about predictive analytics in the model, there's two important aspects to it. There's data and human in the loop. So data can essentially guide us in terms of what is the pattern in data and what you should be predicting. But the refinement of these models is always done by a human in the loop. We want to be at a place where it's an automated machine learning, and that's what big data and AI is. But healthcare is still not there. So there's a combination of data and then human in the loop to finalize our models. And depending on what type of prediction we're making, if it's a clinical prediction, yes, we do have clinical folks on our team that are reviewing those models. And if it's a financial prediction, then we have people with that background refining that model.
Okay. What are the barriers, including teams, systems, processes that organizations face in implementing predictive analytics?
In terms of barriers, the first thing is a lot of people try to do everything by themselves, and that is not always the best strategy in our experience. It is predictive analytics, like Andy also alluded to, there is the statistical aspect of it, and there is a clinical aspect of it broadly. Ensuring that you have teams that communicate and are specialized in both of these would be step one. The second, it would be what is the data that is available to you. We've seen cases where either there is a lot of historical claims data, or maybe on the health system side of it, there's rich content when it comes to EMR, it comes to medical records, but not maybe not as much on the utilization front of it, on the risk adjustment side of it. Sorry. So in understanding what is the data set that you have, access to work with is another something that's very important while you're building out a predictive analytics strategy for your organization.
All right. And do you see a lot of health systems performing predictive analytics and following up? What is the benefit for them?
Yes, a lot of health systems are quickly adopting predictive analytics. It is very critical for them, especially around managing patient care. As more health systems are taking on risk with their payers and from CMS tracking, they want to be able to be in a position to better manage care, both from a utilization standpoint and also from from care in terms of managing clinical conditions for their patients. So yes, a lot of health systems are adopting predictive analytics strategies.
Why was EXL selected as best in KLA? Yes.
Yeah, so we're super excited that we were selected as #1 in class from a risk adjustment and analytics, and we hope to get similar ranking in 23. So when class kind of reviews a vendor, they considers multiple things, right? They consider how useful the tool is, what is the customer experience, what is the value that we are delivering to the customer, and then essentially how critical is the solution in terms of the customer. Does the solution is in line with the market? So there's multiple factors that class considers when they are ranking a vendor. So we fared really well in all those criteria, especially our customer base was extremely happy with the blend of product and services we offer. EXL, our philosophy here is, we are not just a product company. We are, a service company that has products. So we want to make sure that our customer is able to see the value by utilizing our product, and our service organization has been critical to the success of our customers. And that high touch, our customer approach, and really kind of delivering the value and focusing on outcome has really helped us to be #1 in class.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And, if you do have any other questions, of course, we do have a few more minutes, so I can give you all a few more minutes to put your questions into the Q&A. I'll make sure that I get those questions over to our speakers so that they can reach out to you if need be to answer those questions. As long as you haven't submitted them anonymously, I can get them over. But a big thank you to our speakers and our sponsor today, which is EXL. Thank you for helping us facilitate. And thank you again for joining us today. I am going to launch the member experience survey here in a second. Promise it's really, really quick. But thank you all. And until next time, hope you have a good rest of your day and or week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.